Shane Maddox didn't have time for laundry, let alone emotions, when he stormed into the tiny dry cleaner on the corner of 9th and Elway, holding a garment bag like it was a ticking bomb. "I need this suit cleaned in 2 hours." "3 max," he said, dropping the bag on the counter, tapping his Rolex impatiently. The woman behind the counter didn't flinch. She looked up from the computer screen, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and raised an eyebrow. "Dry cleaning isn't magic, you know," Shane blinked. She wasn't what he expected, no forced smile, no fake customer service voice. Just calm confidence and a pair of warm brown eyes that looked like they'd seen straight through his tailored armor. She wore a faded t-shirt with a tiny bleach stain on the collar and still somehow looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. "I have a charity gala tonight," Shane said, tugging at his cuff. "It's important." "Everything's important to people like you," she replied, flipping open the bag. "What happened? Spilled caviar on your $1,000 lapel?" He stared at her, stunned. "Truffle oil," he muttered. "And it was an accident," she laughed. "Of course it was." He didn't know whether to be annoyed or intrigued. "Can you do it or not?" She glanced down at the label on the suit. "Silk blend, not impossible, but you'll owe me." "Fine, whatever it takes." "I meant a coffee," she said, scribbling something on a tag. "You look like the type who needs a real one." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I don't date strangers." "Good thing I wasn't asking you on a date," she replied, flashing a grin that knocked the air right out of him. "Just coffee, you know, human interaction." He scanned her name tag. "Riley," he said, testing the name. It suited her, direct, kind of wild, impossible to ignore. "Shane," he added. She didn't blink. "You're all over the business journals." "Maddox & Co., right?" He nodded. Most people fawned or froze. She didn't do either. "I'll do what I can," she said, already turning toward the back. "Come back at 5. When he returned, the shop was empty except for Riley, who was folding someone's blouse like it was made of glass. "Your suit's done," she said, handing him the garment. "No more truffle oil." He examined it. Perfect. He shouldn't have been surprised, but he was. "You're good at this," he said. "I like fixing things," she replied, shrugging. "Not everything has to be broken forever." He frowned, taken aback by the sudden weight in her tone. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Just one of those days." He hesitated. He never stayed longer than necessary, but something about her made him linger. "Come to the gala," she blinked. "What? You said I owe you 1 coffee. Come to the gala, there'll be plenty," she laughed. "I don't exactly have a dress for a black tie event, Shane Maddox." "I'll handle it," he said, already pulling out his phone. "Size, excuse me." For the dress, her mouth opened, closed. "You're serious?" "I don't joke," he said. "Not about suits." "Or coffee?" She stared at him for a long second, then finally said, "Fine. But just coffee," she added. "And I don't clean your suit again if you spill something." By 7, Riley was standing in the marble lobby of the Astoria Grand in a navy blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Shane had sent a driver a box with the dress and a note that just said, "No truffle oil tonight." When he saw her, he stopped mid-sentence. "You look." His voice caught. "I know," she said, giving him a look. "You clean up okay, too." The gala was glittering and loud, filled with people trying to impress each other, but Shane barely heard a word anyone said. Riley laughed at the right moments, asked questions no one else did, and made even the chairman of the board loosen his tie. "Is this what you do every night?" she whispered during dinner. "Sometimes," he said, "but it's never like this." "Because of the shrimp cocktail, because of you." She looked at him, startled, but she didn't look away. Later, on the balcony, with the city humming below them, she leaned on the railing. "Why'd you really ask me here?" "Because I walked into a dry cleaner looking for a clean suit," he said, "and found someone who makes me forget I'm supposed to be a machine." She turned to him slowly. "You're not." "You're just hiding." "Maybe," he said. "But if I was hiding, you just found me." She let out a breath, soft and slow. "You say things like that to all your dry cleaners, only the ones who make me feel like this." She didn't say anything, but she didn't move away when he stepped closer. "You still owe me that coffee," she whispered. "I'll get you one," he said. "Every morning, if you let me." This time, she smiled, and he knew right then he wasn't just chasing a clean suit, he was chasing her. The next morning, Riley stood in the back room of the shop, holding a mug of oversteeped tea, watching steam curl into the air. She hadn't slept much. Not out of regret, but because every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way Shane had looked at her on that balcony. Like he'd never seen a skyline before. Like somehow she was the view. She shook her head, muttering to herself, "Get it together." The bell above the door jingled, and she half expected it to be a customer with a coffee stain emergency or a lost coat ticket. It wasn't. Shane walked in, wearing a charcoal jacket over a crisp shirt, no tie. His presence filled the space like a thunderstorm rolling in without warning. He held out a paper cup. "You said I owed you a coffee," he said. "You remembered? I make it a point to repay my debts." "Is that what I am now?" "A line item on your balance sheet." "No, you're the part I don't know how to calculate." Riley rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched. "You always this poetic before 9 a.m. "No," he said, "but you make it hard to be anything else." She took the coffee, trying not to let their hands brush. "You know, most men would have stopped at the gala. I'm not most men. And I'm not a charity case." His expression shifted. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know," she said. "You live in a world of private jets and gala dinners. I live above a laundromat with a leaky faucet and a neighbor who plays the trumpet at midnight. It's not exactly a natural fit." "I'm not asking you to move into my world," he said. "I'm asking you to let me into yours." She stared at him, stunned by the sudden seriousness in his voice. "I have inventory to sort," she said after a pause, setting the cup down, "and a whole stack of receipts that aren't going to reconcile themselves." "I'll help," she laughed. "You don't know the first thing about polyester blends or stain coating. I can learn. You don't do manual labor. You'd be surprised." She narrowed her eyes. "Fine. There's a delivery in the back that needs to be unpacked. Let's see how long you last." 10 minutes later, Shane was lugging boxes while Riley sorted through garment slips. He didn't complain. He didn't even flinch when a plastic-wrapped bag of uniforms tipped and nearly took out his knee. "You're actually doing it," she said, folding her arms. "I told you, I'm invested." "In what exactly?" "You." The word hung between them, weighty and quiet. "You don't even know me," she said softly. "I know your hands are always moving when you're thinking. I know you hum when you're focused. And I know you're scared of what this could be." She looked away. "People like you don't stay." "Then let me prove I do." A sharp knock interrupted them. Riley darted to the front, grateful for the distraction. An older man stood at the counter, holding a ripped duffel bag. "Sorry," Riley said, taking it from him. "We'll see what we can do." After he left, Shane leaned against the doorframe. "You know all your customers by name." "I try." "That's rare." "I don't think so," she said. "You just have to care." He nodded slowly. "That's what I like about you." She hesitated. "You sure it's not just the challenge?" "I don't chase things for fun, Riley." She didn't answer, but he could see the wall she'd started to put up had a crack now, a small one, enough to let something through. Later that afternoon, a courier arrived with a small, square box. Riley eyed it suspiciously. "I didn't order anything," she said. The box was wrapped in dark paper, tied with a silk ribbon. Inside was a note with one line, "For when the faucet leaks and the trumpet plays." Beneath the note was a pair of noise-canceling headphones and a miniature tool kit. Riley stared at it, heart thudding. Shane hadn't just heard her, he'd listened. That night she sat on the edge of her bed, headphones around her neck, the note still in her hand. The trumpet next door blared a sour note, but she didn't flinch. She was starting to believe him, and that terrified her more than any leaky faucet ever could. The rain had started without warning, fat drops pelting the sidewalk as Riley stepped outside to lock up for the night. She tugged her hood higher over her damp hair, fumbling with the stubborn lock. Behind her, footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. "Door giving you trouble?" Shane's voice cut through the steady hum of rain. "Just old," Riley muttered, twisting the key again until it finally clicked. "It sticks when the weather shifts." He held an umbrella over her without asking, the fabric whispering with each droplet it caught. "You know you don't have to keep showing up like this," she said, gesturing vaguely down the street. "It's not part of the coffee deal." "I didn't come for coffee." "Then what?" "I want you to meet someone," he said. She blinked. "Tonight, I'll drive." The umbrella tilted slightly as he opened the passenger door of a sleek black car. She hesitated, then slid in, pressing her damp jacket against her thighs. The drive took less than 15 minutes, but it felt longer in the charged silence. Shane didn't fill space with idle words he never had. When they pulled into a quiet residential street, Riley frowned. "This isn't what I expected, I know." He led her up a narrow path bordered by trimmed hedges. A porch light flickered on as they approached. Shane rang the bell once. A woman in her 60s opened the door, her silver hair pinned back neatly. "Hi, Mom," Shane said quietly. The woman's eyes softened. "You could have called first, honey." "I wanted to surprise you. This is Riley." Riley extended her hand instinctively. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Maddox, call me Evelyn," she replied, ushering them inside. "Shane doesn't bring people around often." The living room was modest, nothing like the life of luxury Riley had pictured for someone like Shane. Family photos lined the mantel, and a faint scent of lavender hung in the air. "Can I get you something?" Evelyn asked. "I just made tea." Riley nodded. "Tea sounds great." Shane sat on the edge of a worn armchair, his hands clasped between his knees. He looked different here, less steel, more skin. "Your mom's place is warm," Riley said softly. "She raised me here," Shane replied. "We didn't always have much. She worked nights cleaning offices, and I used to do my homework on the janitor cart." Riley turned to him, startled. "You never mentioned that." "I don't talk about it," he said. "Not because I'm ashamed. I just learned early on that people listen differently once they know." Evelyn returned with a tray, her eyes flicking gently between them. "He always thought success was the only way to keep people from looking down on him." "I understand that," Riley said. Shane's gaze met hers. "I don't want to hide things anymore." She set her cup down. "Why now?" "Because I don't want to miss something real, because I was too busy pretending I didn't need it." Evelyn smiled faintly and excused herself, leaving them alone in the quiet. "I used to think showing someone this part of my life would make them see me differently," Shane said. "Maybe it does," Riley replied, "but not in a bad way." He exhaled slowly, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either. But I'm glad I did." They left just after 10 and the rain had stopped. Shane walked her to the car, his hand brushing hers as they reached the passenger side. "Do you want to come over tomorrow?" she asked suddenly. "My place isn't much, but I make a mean grilled cheese." "I'd like that." She paused. "And maybe I'll tell you something about my past too." "I'm not in a rush." She looked at him, really looked past the crisp lines of his clothes and the reputation that followed him like a shadow. "Neither am I," she said. As he opened the car door for her, Riley realized something had shifted. Not in a dramatic, fireworks kind of way, but in the quiet way a storm clears, revealing something grounded beneath it. She was starting to trust him. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a mistake. The scent of grilled butter and sharp cheddar hung in the air as Riley flipped the sandwich on the stovetop, her hands steady despite the thrum in her chest. Shane sat at the tiny kitchen table across from her, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, watching her like she was the only thing anchoring him. "This is the only meal I can make that doesn't involve a microwave or a fire extinguisher," she said over her shoulder. "That's reassuring." "I was starting to think you were perfect." She glanced at him. "No such thing." "I don't know," he said, leaning back slightly. "You've got a gift for turning ordinary things into something worth remembering." She slid the sandwich onto a plate and set it in front of him. "That's just cheese and bread. That's comfort. That's real." He took a bite, then raised his brows. "And that's incredible," she laughed, finally sitting down with her own plate. "I told you." The room was quiet for a few minutes, filled only with the soft clinking of plates and the occasional hum of traffic through her open window. Shane set his fork down, gaze fixed on her. "I got an offer to sell the company," he said. She looked up slowly. "Are you thinking about it?" "I wasn't. But then I started wondering if holding on to it is just habit or fear." "Of what?" "Of what happens when I don't have it to define me." She studied him for a moment. "I think you've already started figuring that out," he nodded, his jaw tight. "It's not easy walking away from something I built. You're not walking away from who you are, you're just making space for who you could be." He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. I never thought I'd meet someone who could say something like that and make me believe it. Well, she said, resting her chin in her hand, maybe I'm not your usual someone. No, Riley, you're exactly the person I didn't know I was waiting for. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. If you sell it, what would you do? I don't know yet, but I want time to figure it out, time with people who don't care about what I own, just about who I am, she swallowed. That's a big leap. He stood, took her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. I want to take it with you, she blinked up at him. Don't say that unless you mean it. I've never been more sure. He kissed her then, slow, deliberate, and full of something that felt like truth. She clutched his shirt, grounding herself. When they broke apart, her voice was barely a whisper. What if we mess it up? Then we'll figure it out, together. A week later, Shane stood in the middle of a sunlit boutique, holding a folded piece of paper. Riley walked in, eyes wide at the sight of the place, transformed, repainted walls, new signage, fresh fixtures. Her name was on the glass outside now. You did this, she asked. I bought the building, he said, handing her the paper, and gave you the shop, the deeds in your name. She stared at him, frozen. Why? Because you breathe life into places. I just gave you one that's finally yours. She stepped forward, emotion flickering in her eyes. You didn't have to, I wanted to. I'm stepping back from Maddox & Co., not to lose something but to gain this, us. Her voice cracked. This is real. It always was. A few months later, they stood on a rooftop surrounded by string lights and friends. Riley wore a soft ivory dress that fluttered in the breeze. Shane stood beside her, no tie, no boardroom mask. Just a man who had once walked into a dry cleaner and found the one thing he hadn't known he was missing. The officiant smiled. Do you, Shane Maddox, take Riley Morgan? I do, he said before the question even finished, eyes locked on hers. And do you, Riley Morgan, take Shane Maddox? I do, she whispered when they kissed. The city shimmered behind them, but neither noticed. Because in that moment, there was nothing but the two of them and everything they'd built from the simplest beginning. A suit. A stain. And a love neither one of them had seen coming, but neither one would ever let go. The spring air was warm with the scent of wisteria as Shane and Riley walked hand in hand down the quiet street just outside the city. The new building Riley had moved her shop into was thriving. She'd expanded the services to include tailoring, shoe repair, and even a small display of handmade accessories from local artists. The place had become more than a shop, it was a neighborhood staple, the kind of place where people lingered even after picking up their things. Shane had followed through. He stepped away from Maddox & Co. after restructuring the company and placing it in the hands of a trusted executive board. The move shocked the financial world, but Shane had been clear in every interview. Success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. He didn't need validation anymore, not from headlines, not from shareholders. As they turned the corner, Riley tugged his hand. Come on. I want to show you something. He let her lead him into a small brick building with a painted gold door. Inside, the space was airy and open, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. A sign leaned against the wall, not yet mounted, the Maddox Foundation Community Arts and Skills Center. I signed the lease last week, she said, eyes bright. I used the grant we got from the city and a little help from your anonymous angel investor. I wonder who that could be, he said, brushing her hair behind her ear. I've been teaching sewing classes on Sundays. And there's a local painter who wants to do workshops for kids. It's not just about clothes anymore, it's about possibility. He glanced around. This is what you've always been meant to do, uplift, build. She leaned against him. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have, he said. But I'm glad you didn't have to. They left the building and headed to a quiet dinner reservation he'd made at a tucked-away rooftop garden restaurant overlooking the river. The place was mostly candlelight and string bulbs, the kind of quiet beauty that didn't need to shout to be noticed. As they settled into their table, Riley tilted her head. You're nervous, he exhaled. A little, she reached across the table. Tell me. I've been thinking about what you said that day, about making space for who I could be. I want that, but not alone. She blinked, lips parting. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small velvet box, and opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring, one central diamond set in a delicate gold band, timeless and unpretentious. "Riley Morgan," he said, voice low but steady, "I walked into your life needing a clean suit. And you gave me a clean slate. You've seen every part of me, the parts I tried to bury, the parts I didn't realize mattered, and you never looked away. I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it. Will you marry me?" She didn't speak immediately. Her eyes shimmered, but her hands were steady as she reached across the table and closed the box gently. "No." His heart stopped. She smiled. "I won't marry the man who walked into my shop all those months ago, but I will marry the man you've become." "Yes, Shane." "Yes, I'll marry you." Relief broke across his face, and he stood, pulling her into his arms right there in the middle of the restaurant. Their kiss earned a few soft cheers and clinking glasses, but neither of them heard anything except the sound of each other's breath. They married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony in the garden behind Evelyn's house. Riley wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple, elegant, with tiny stitched stars along the hem. Shane wore the same charcoal suit that had brought him into her life, expertly restored and pressed to perfection. Evelyn stood beside them, beaming, as did a few of Riley's regulars from the shop, and even the trumpet-playing neighbor who had since taken up the harmonica. The vows were personal, quiet promises exchanged under a canopy of soft lights and fresh blooms. There was no orchestra, no 5-tier cake, no tabloid coverage, just love. That summer they traveled through Italy with nothing but 2 suitcases and a notebook full of places Riley had always dreamed of seeing. Shane unplugged completely, letting go of the endless calls and meetings. They spent mornings on sun-drenched balconies and afternoons wandering cobblestone streets, sharing gelato and stories they hadn't yet told. Back home, Riley's shop continued to thrive. She trained a small team to help manage the growing business and spent more time at the community center, mentoring young creatives and helping them find their footing. Shane took on a quiet role at the foundation, overseeing scholarships and partnerships, but he never returned to the corporate grind. He was building something different now, something lasting. One crisp autumn morning, Riley stepped onto their porch with a steaming mug in hand, watching Shane rake the leaves that had gathered in their front yard. She called out to him, "You missed a spot." He looked up and grinned. "I left that one just for you." She descended the steps and walked into his arms without hesitation. "I never thought I'd have this," she said into his chest. "A home, a future I chose. You didn't just find it," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. "You built it." They stood there for a long time in the quiet of their own world, no longer running from the past or racing towards some unreachable goal. They had arrived together, and nothing, not leaky faucets or boardroom battles or even truffle oil, could ever pull them apart again.